as we gently drift into the cosmic tapestry of time, settling into the quiet hum of the universe around us. Let us embark on a journey. Tonight, we will step back, not just years, but millennia, into an Earth both profoundly familiar and utterly, beautifully alien. Imagine for a moment a world swathed in an ethereal cold where colossal sheets of ice shimmered across continents like forgotten dreams, where magnificent, towering beings roamed through vast, frozen grasslands, and where our own ancient ancestors, mere whispers of consciousness, huddled close to the flickering embrace of fire, etching their stories and their very essence into the raw canvas of bone and stone. This, my friend, is the Ice Age. Not a single fleeting moment frozen in time, but an immense epoch, stretching across millions of years, patiently sculpting the very contours of the Earth we now inhabit, in ways we are only just beginning to truly fathom. Before we delve deeper into this ancient mystery, allow yourself to simply be. Perhaps you are listening under the silent gaze of the moon, or perhaps you are merely drawn by a profound curiosity, seeking a calm harbor in which your thoughts may gently unfurl. Whatever your reason, let this be a slow, unhurried voyage. There is no need for haste, no need to tether yourself to the demands of the clock, for the Ice Age, while profoundly cold, unfolded at a pace so majestically gradual that entire human lifetimes could pass, like grains of sand through an hourglass, without anyone ever truly perceiving the monumental shift of the world around them. The first delicate secret whispered by this ancient Earth is that the Ice Age was never a single unbroken freeze. No, it was a grand rhythmic ballet, a cosmic breath of cold glacial periods intermingled with fleeting warmer intervals, lovingly termed interglacials. Our planet's climate, a sensitive and intricate mechanism, swayed back and forth over tens of thousands of years, a profound dance choreographed by the most subtle changes in Earth's elliptical orbit around its distant sun, the gentle tilt of its axis, and even the almost imperceptible wobble, like a giant top slowly losing its spin. These infinitesimal shifts in the sun's embrace completely reimagined our world. Oceans, like shy lovers, receded from the shores, revealing vast, forgotten lands. Bridges of Earth unseen for eons rose from the depths, linking continents, and entire ecosystems, fragile and transient, appeared and vanished, much like the tides, but on a scale so grand it defied human comprehension. But let us not burden our minds with the intricate mechanics of science just yet. Instead, close your eyes and truly picture this world. Imagine yourself standing on what will one day become the northern expanses of Europe, or the wild heart of North America, or the desolate beauty of Siberia. The horizon before you is not punctuated by the sharp silhouettes of cities or the soft green of forests. No, instead, it is dominated by a shimmering, colossal wall of ice, hundreds of meters high, stretching farther than the eye can ever perceive. A silent, eternal sentinel. The air bites with a sharp, dry crispness, heavy with the primal scent of snow and ancient stone. And yet, against all odds, despite this profound cold, the landscape is far from lifeless. Out on these vast frozen plains, magnificent herds of woolly mammoths roam, their impossibly curved tusks gleaming like polished ivory in the pale, filtered light of a forgotten sun. In the Americas, giant ground sloths, moving with a ponderous grace, lumber across the land, their shaggy forms like moving mountains, and beneath the silent vigilance of the pale sky, saber-toothed cats, their muscles coiled like springs of ancient power, crouch low in the sparse, tough grasses, their formidable teeth catching the light, ready to claim their ancient dominion. Farther south, in pockets where the relentless ice never quite reached, life still thrived in forests and beside flowing rivers. And in these warmer sanctuaries, our human ancestors, resourceful and tenacious, found ways to endure. They followed the rhythmic migrations of the herds, their spears, tipped with carefully chipped stone, glinting in the hunt. They gathered around the sacred warmth of fires, sharing their meager warmth, their stories, and their very breath with the world. They, of course, did not know they lived in what we now categorize as the Ice Age. For them, in their simple, profound existence, it was simply life. And this, perhaps, is the most profound revelation about the deep past. It was never a monolithic frozen wasteland, stretching from pole to pole. While the northern continents lay locked in an icy embrace, the equatorial regions remained warm enough to cradle vibrant jungles and shimmering deserts. Life, in its infinite wisdom, adapted. It flowed, it moved, it endured. The Earth, during this epoch, was not only colder, it was wilder, sharper, a canvas painted with profound contrasts, a symphony of survival. The overture to this grand saga began long before human consciousness graced its stage. For millions of years, our blue planet has danced to a silent rhythm, shifting between epochs of cold and warmth, each leaving its indelible signature in the very stone and soil beneath our feet. Scientists, these modern-day cosmic detectives, have painstakingly pieced together this ancient narrative, from clues hidden within ice cores, cylinders of frozen history, drilled deep into the ancient hearts of Antarctica and Greenland. Layer by fragile layer, these cores meticulously trap tiny, shimmering bubbles of ancient air, offering us a direct whisper from the atmosphere of hundreds of thousands of years ago. From these frozen archives, we understand that the Ice Age did not descend upon us in a sudden dramatic flourish. No, it crept forward with the slow, inexorable grace of glaciers advancing, then subtly retreating, then advancing again, like a colossal, patient tide, grinding rock into the finest dust. As this immense ice grew, it lovingly, yet ruthlessly, reshaped the very land beneath its weight. Mountains, once proud and jagged, were softened into rounded peaks. Valleys deepened, carved by the relentless flow, and enormous boulders, silent wanderers, were pushed across the vast landscapes, like pebbles by a playful titan, left behind as poignant memories, when the glaciers finally, reluctantly pulled back. Even now, if you walk through the ancient lands of Canada, the mystical expanses of Scandinavia, or the northern United States, you can still perceive these profound marks, lakes scoured out by the slow, deliberate movement of ice, U-shaped valleys, telling tales of glaciers long vanished, and solitary rocks carried hundreds of kilometers from their primordial birthplaces. But it was not merely the land that felt this transformative touch. The very oceans, the vast, breathing heart of our planet, receded by more than 100 meters as their precious waters became locked away in the ever-growing ice sheet. Entire continents seemed to swell, growing larger, revealing hidden contours. Asia and North America, once separated by vast expanses of water, found themselves joined by a land bridge we now reverently call Beringia, a frozen highway stretching across what is today the Bering Strait. This extraordinary bridge did not merely alter geography, it profoundly reshaped the very trajectory of history. It became a silent, epic pathway, allowing humans and animals alike to migrate between continents, spreading the vibrant tapestry of life across the globe in ways whose echoes would resonate for thousands of years. Imagine standing on that ancient bridge. The wind, a biting sculptor, cuts across the open tundra, carrying snow that never quite settles, a constant, ethereal dance. Herds of caribou and mammoth move in steady, purposeful lines, their breath misting the frigid air, grazing on the sparse, dry grasses that somehow defy the cold. Wolves, their fur thick and resilient, stalk them from a respectful distance, and following this grand procession, small, determined groups of humans trudge forward, wrapped in layers of animal furs, their breath curling like whispered prayers, into the vast, pale sky. Every single step they take, every deliberate movement, carries them closer to a new, unknown world, a profound frontier. What is truly remarkable, as we contemplate this ancient vista, is the exquisite interconnectedness of everything. When the ice grew, the earth, in a delicate balance, began to dry out, because so much of its vital water was held captive within the colossal glaciers. Deserts, like ancient wounds, expanded their reach, and the great tropical forests, once verdant and limitless, began to shrink. Where once there had been an endless sea of green, now stretched open plains, reaching beyond the limits of perception. This immense steppe environment, often referred to by scientists as the Mammoth Steppe, covered much of Europe, Asia, and North America. It was a harsh realm. Yes, but it was also astonishingly rich in life, home to vast herds of grazing animals that could sustain both the formidable predators and the first human hunters brave enough to follow their ancient calling. Yet, for all its immense scale and profound severity, the Ice Age was not an unchanging monolith. Every few tens of thousands of years, the ice, like a reluctant giant, would retreat, temperatures would rise, and the planet, in a sigh of relief, would green again. Rivers would swell, forests would return, and the great grasslands would momentarily shrink. But these warmer interludes, like all things in the universe, were not destined to last forever. Inevitably, the glaciers would creep forward once more, slow but relentlessly patient, until the world surrendered to the cold anew. It was during one of these warmer, more forgiving intervals that humans truly began to flourish, learning to coax shapes from stone to paint their vibrant lives onto the silent walls of caves, and eventually to step out of the encompassing Ice Age world entirely and into what we now, with the privilege of hindsight, call history. Even so, the delicate fingerprints of that frozen era have never truly disappeared. We discern them not only in the sculpted contours of the land, but in the very fabric of ourselves, our ancient migrations, our deepest myths, even the subtle adaptations within our bodies, still carry faint echoes of that profound time. And to truly grasp the essence of the earth we stand upon today, we must journey back into that frozen world, to witness the silent, majestic movement of the ice, the grand procession of colossal animals, and to remember, with a profound sense of wonder, that our world has been so many glorious things before it became this one. And so, let us continue our quiet walk into the cold. The wind, an ancient storyteller, is beginning to rise, and the horizon stretches before us, an ethereal white with the promise of snow. But there is so much more to behold, for this is merely the exquisite beginning, and the Ice Age in its silent grandeur has so much more to unveil. The cold did not descend in a sudden, violent embrace. It crept across the earth in slow, quiet, almost imperceptible waves, so gradual that no single lifetime, however long, could have possibly sensed the profound change. But over the span of thousands of years, the transformation was an unstoppable, relentless time. It began with infinitesimal shifts in the planet's celestial dance around the sun, tilts and wobbles so subtly insignificant they would seem meaningless to any creature standing upon the ground. Yet, these delicate rhythmic motions altered the amount of sunlight that graced the northern reaches of our world. And little by little, like a cosmic whisper, summers became cooler. The snow that once melted each year, a fleeting visitor, began to linger, a persistent guest. And over vast stretches of time, that lingering snow, pressed down by its own accumulating weight, transmuted into the very essence of ice. It is almost impossible, in our current warmth, to truly imagine how profoundly different the world appeared before this magnificent transformation began. Much of the northern continents were a verdant tapestry of green, adorned with sprawling forests and open, sun-drenched plains. Rivers, like veins of life, ran freely, and animals grazed contentedly across lands that today we know only as frozen tundra. But as the centuries unfurled, and each summer, like a forgetful lover, failed to erase the snowy embrace of the previous winter, a slow, patient accumulation commenced, layer upon delicate layer, year after patient year, until the snow, compressed under its own colossal weight, hardened into the immutable majesty of ice. From these humble, quiet beginnings, the first glaciers began their slow, deliberate march, and once they found their rhythm, it seemed nothing could ever truly halt their progress. The great ice sheets did not merely appear, as if by magic. They advanced with the quiet, inexorable force of ancient armies, inch by painstaking inch. At their peak, these glaciers were so unbelievably massive, so overwhelmingly powerful, that they swallowed entire landscapes, burying mountains and valleys alike beneath their frozen dominion. The Laurentide ice sheet, a titan of ice, stretched across much of North America, blanketing the vast expanse of Canada and reaching deep into what is now the United States. In Europe, the Fennoscandian ice sheet, a formidable presence, covered Scandinavia and pushed relentlessly southward, reshaping the land with its crushing, silent weight. Even in the southern hemisphere, The lofty highlands of South America and New Zealand bore their own icy crowns, fragments of this global embrace. The very air itself, the invisible breath of the planet, transformed as the world succumbed to the cold. When such an immense volume of water was held captive in the frozen embrace of ice, the oceans like a sigh fell, revealing wide, uncharted stretches of land that had once been hidden beneath the waves. Winds, like ancient sculptors, scoured the open plains, carrying fine dust for hundreds of miles, depositing it in thick, fertile layers that still lie buried beneath the soil in parts of China and the American Midwest. In these arid, relentless, and often windy conditions, forests, like fragile dreams, withered, while resilient grasslands spread their dominion. Entire ecosystems in a grand migration shifted southward, ceaselessly searching for the elusive solace of warmth. But Earth, in its profound complexity, is not a simple, predictable machine. Its climate has always been a magnificent symphony of countless forces working in intricate harmony, and while orbital changes, those celestial dances, initiated the process, they were not alone in orchestrating the grand drama of the Ice Age. Volcanic eruptions, like sudden fiery breaths, spewed ash and gases into the sky, dimming the life-giving sunlight and cooling the atmosphere even further. The oceans, too, played their ancient part, as currents shifted, locking even more heat away in their deep, mysterious abysses. Over vast stretches of time, this intricate feedback loop of cooling built upon itself, like a quiet, relentless crescendo, until the planet finally settled into a state profoundly different from the one we know today. Yet, even in this intensely frozen world, life in its infinite tenacity endured. Plants, like silent warriors, adapted to the biting cold, spreading their verdant tendrils across the very edges of the glaciers, while hardy, resilient grasses colonized the vast open steppes. Animals, in turn, followed this green migration. Woolly mammoths and mastodons, their heavy, shaggy coats and thick layers of fat perfectly suited to the bitter winds, roamed in colossal herds, living monuments to adaptation. Bison, musk oxen, and reindeer ranged across the open plains, grazing endlessly on the dry, tough tundra. Predators, too, thrived in this challenging environment. Saber-toothed cats, with their formidable, curved fangs, lurked in the silent shadows of the grasslands, their primal muscles coiled, while packs of dire wolves, larger and more powerful than their modern descendants, tracked the rhythm of the herds across the snow. And beyond these magnificent, colossal animals, there were the smaller, more subtle survivors. Foxes, darting like quicksilver between drifts of snow, birds, migrating along ancient invisible routes, rodents, tunneling into the frozen, resilient earth. Every living thing in its own unique way, meticulously carved out its niche, shaped by a world where the rules of survival were undeniably harsh, but profoundly constant. Humans, though fragile in comparison, entered this grand stage much later. But even before their arrival, the Ice Age had already inscribed its indelible mark upon the land. As glaciers expanded, they scraped deep, powerful grooves into the earth, crushing rock and grinding it into a fine, almost ethereal powder. When the ice finally retreated, it left behind a landscape that was raw and new, dotted with pristine lakes and winding rivers, born from the pure, crystalline meltwater. In some places, it left behind enormous piles of stone and gravel, the silent ruins of its long, slow, majestic advance. These were not just superficial changes to the scenery. No, they were the very foundations of the world we walk upon now. In many profound ways, this period was both violent and quiet. Glaciers moved with a relentless, unstoppable force, yet their progress was almost utterly invisible on the fleeting scale of a single human life. Mountains bowed under their immense weight, yet an animal could live its entire existence in the silent shadow of that ice, without ever perceiving it move a single inch. That, my friends, is the profound scale of deep time, where the grand drama of the earth unfolds in increments too slow for any one pair of eyes to truly witness, and yet leaves behind marks that persist for millions of years. If you could have stood on the pristine edge of one of those early glaciers, you would have felt it, not in the way you feel the sudden rush of a storm or a brisk gust of wind, but in the quiet, immense heaviness of the air, the faint, deep groan of shifting ice, and the endless, almost spiritual stillness of a frozen horizon. The sky above would be a pale, dry expanse, the sun a low, distant disk, and the land utterly silent, save for the distant, resonant crack of the ice as it imperceptibly crept forward. But this, my friends, was only the very beginning. Over time, the cold deepened, the glaciers grew larger, and the world entered one of the most dramatic, yet silent periods in its history. Yet, this frozen planet was far from dead. It was alive, changing, shaping the land, the seas, and eventually the very fate of the humans who would learn, with astonishing resilience, to survive within its embrace. And so the stage was set. A planet meticulously wrapped in ice, a landscape carved by forces too vast for human eyes to fully comprehend, and a world where survival would demand adaptation in ways no creature had ever truly faced before. From this magnificent frozen stage, the true story of the Ice Age would begin, one slow, deliberate step at a time. When the ice reigned supreme over the earth, it wasn't only the land that seemed immense, stretching into infinity. The creatures that walked upon it were unlike anything alive today. This, dear listener, was an age of giants, a time shaped by a world both unforgiving and utterly vast, where size itself was a profound strategy for survival. To stand in that ancient world would have been to feel exquisitely small, no matter who or what you were. The great herds, like living rivers, came first. Imagine an endless plain, cold and scoured by ceaseless winds, yet vibrantly alive with movement. Woolly mammoths, like colossal shaggy ships, marched in long, purposeful lines, their immense coats swaying like curtains of coarse ancient hair, their curved tusks sweeping the ground as they patiently dug through the snow for the precious grasses beneath. These were not rare, solitary beasts. No, they gathered in groups by the dozens, sometimes even hundreds, moving across the steppe in a continuous ancient quest for sustenance. Their colossal footprints pressed deep into the frozen ground, carved pathways that stretched for miles, silent highways of survival. Alongside them roamed the mastodons, stockier cousins of the mammoths, their shorter legs and straighter tusks perfectly suited for the mixed forests that clung tenaciously to the edges of the glacial plains. They tore at branches and bark with a steady, determined rhythm, stripping the land bare as they moved from one patch of sheltering trees to the next. But the mammoths and mastodons were only a part of this magnificent frozen parade. The grasslands themselves were alive with bison, their heavy, muscular shoulders and thick fur coats serving as formidable shields against the cutting wind. Musk oxen, low and broad, clustered in tight, defensive circles when predators dared to draw near, a living fortress of fur and horn. Reindeer, the ancient ancestors of the caribou, migrated endlessly, their hooves striking the hard ground in a rhythm as old and profound as the glaciers themselves. And where there was prey, there were, of course, predators. Dire wolves, larger and significantly stronger than their modern descendants, prowled the edges of the herds, their powerful teeth built for crushing bone, their howls echoing across the vast, silent plains. Saber-toothed cats, with their iconic, impossibly long, curved fangs, lay in wait among the sparse shrubs, their muscles coiled, ready to bring down prey many times their own size with a swift, brutal strike. Even the cave lions, leaner but nearly twice the weight of today's African lions, ranged across the steppes, hunting in coordinated groups that could challenge even the most formidable prey. And towering over this already harsh and dramatic world were the glaciers themselves. These titanic rivers of ice loomed in the distance like colossal frozen walls, their sheer faces fractured with deep ethereal blue crevasses, whispering secrets of unimaginable depths. They moved slowly, imperceptibly, yet their presence was impossible to ignore. The air near them carried a chill that cut straight through the thickest fur, a primordial breath. Each crack of shifting ice echoed for miles, a deep, resonant sound that reminded every living thing of the immense, untamed power lying just beyond reach. Yet, for all their overwhelming dominance, the glaciers were not static monuments. They advanced and retreated, grinding relentlessly across the continents, scouring away the very soil and reshaping the world beneath. Where they passed, they left behind bare primordial stone, scraped clean by their slow and merciless weight. They carved valleys that would later fill with rivers and lakes, creating cliffs and ridges that profoundly shaped the migration paths of animals, forcing them into new, uncharted lands, and in doing so, creating new opportunities for the cunning predators that hunted them. In the silent shadow of those glaciers, life, in its myriad forms, persisted. It adapted in ways that seem almost miraculous today. Many of the great Ice Age animals carried thick, insulating layers of fat beneath their hides. A natural armor against the bitter cold, their coats were incredibly dense, not just fur but underlayers of wool, so fine that it trapped heat close to the skin, creating a living warmth. Even their blood was different. Some species evolved the astonishing ability to circulate warmth more efficiently, keeping their limbs from freezing even in the harshest winds. Humans, too, fragile by comparison, learned to live alongside these magnificent giants. For our ancestors, the colossal presence of mammoths was not only a danger, but a profound lifeline. From their immense bones came the framework for shelter. From their thick hides came clothing. From their rich meat came the precious calories that allowed small, resilient bands of hunters to survive in a world where food could be desperately scarce, and the nights stretched long and bitter. And still, the sheer scale of the Ice Age world could dwarf any single life. A solitary glacier could stretch for hundreds of miles, an immobile ocean of ice. A herd of mammoths could take days to pass from one horizon to the other, a living river of fur and tusks. Even the sky seemed larger, an infinite canvas, its pale light reflecting off snow and ice in every direction, amplifying the sense of boundless space. This was not a world crafted for comfort. It was a world that demanded profound endurance, and in return it forged creatures, both human and animal, into survivors of extraordinary resilience, living testaments to the power of adaptation. To stand there on that cold and windswept land would have been to witness the earth in one of its rawest, most unadulterated forms. The air sharp enough to sting, the distant sound of glaciers shifting, like the deep groan of an ancient slumbering beast, the sight of animals larger than houses, moving in slow, deliberate lines across the horizon, a primal ballet. Every part of it spoke of a planet reshaped by forces far beyond any single creature's control. And yet, there was a delicate balance in it all. The glaciers advanced, yes, but they also retreated. The giants thrived, but they also fell to cunning hunters or vanished into the silent snow when food grew scarce. Life persisted, not because it conquered the cold, but because it learned, with astonishing grace, to live within it. As the world moved through these frozen millennia, this intricate balance would be tested again and again. The climate shifted, ice gave way to warmth, then, like a returning tide, the cold would creep back. Animals migrated, adapted, or in the grand cosmic dance, disappeared. And somewhere in the midst of it all, humans kept learning, kept watching, and kept following the slow, majestic rhythm of the earth and its icebound giants. Now, as we journey further into this frozen past, our focus gently turns to the very engine that drove it all. The strange, intricate changes in the planet's climate, and how they set every single one of these monumental events into motion. The cold, you see, was never a steady, unchanging state. Even at the profound height of the Ice Age, the Earth was not locked in one singular, unchanging freeze. It breathed, over tens of thousands of years. The temperature, like a slow, patient tide, rose and with each subtle shift, the glaciers advanced or retreated, meticulously reshaping the land and the myriad lives that depended upon its contours. To truly understand this ancient world, it isn't enough to simply picture a planet buried in snow. We must endeavor to perceive how that snow moved, how the cold deepened with a profound insistence, and then, in a delicate counterpoint, eased, and how these long, quiet changes, like an ancient scribe, meticulously wrote the grand story of the Ice Age. At the very heart of this cosmic rhythm were cycles we can still discern and trace today. Scientists, with their insatiable curiosity, call them Milankovitch cycles, named after the brilliant mathematician who first calculated their intricate patterns. They are driven by the graceful, celestial dance of the Earth around the Sun, not in a perfect, rigid circle, but in a long, slow, elliptical waltz that subtly changes over tens of thousands of years. The very shape of our orbit stretches and then gently relaxes. The tilt of the Earth's axis, like a cosmic head, leans a little more, then a little less. Even the planet's gentle wobble, reminiscent of a spinning top slowly losing its momentum, subtly shifts the way sunlight reaches different parts of the world. Each of these profound movements unfolds far too slowly for any single generation to ever truly notice. Yet together, in their intricate dance, they change everything. When the axial tilt is smaller, summers in the northern hemisphere, like a delicate flame, are cooler. Snow that falls in winter, a fleeting visitor, lingers longer into the next year, and the ice, with a quiet determination, grows. When the tilt increases, the summers, like a warming embrace, grow warmer and stronger, melting more snow, and the ice in turn reluctantly retreats. It is a balance, subtle yet utterly relentless, patiently turning the planet from cold to less cold and back again, across vast, unimaginable stretches of time. Yet, these orbital changes alone, exquisite as they are, cannot fully explain the profound force of the Ice Age. The Earth's climate is an intricate web of delicate feedbacks, where one small, almost imperceptible shift triggers another, in a cascade of cosmic consequences. When glaciers expand, their immense reflective surfaces bounce more sunlight back into the vastness of space, which in turn cools the planet even further. The colder it becomes, the more the oceans, like giant sponges, draw down carbon dioxide, locking it away and subtly lowering greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. That subtle drop in carbon dioxide cools the world even more, helping the ice to spread farther. A relentless, icy embrace. It is a profound chain reaction that takes millennia to meticulously build and even longer to gently reverse. But the cycle, in its infinite wisdom, works both ways. When the Earth begins its slow, gentle journey towards warmth, the opposite unfolds. Ice melts, exposing dark land and open water, which in turn absorb more of the sun's benevolent heat. The oceans, like ancient breaths, release carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere, trapping more warmth. The feedback loop reverses, and the glaciers, with a sigh, retreat. The planet does not simply plummet into an ice age or dramatically escape from it. It moves back and forth between these profound states, like a colossal pendulum, steady in its swing, but immense in its scale. Even within these grand, overarching cycles, there were smaller, more sudden jolts, unexpected pulses of cold or warmth that rippled across the Ice Age world, like stones dropped into a vast, silent pond. Some emanated from the mysterious depths of the oceans, as vast currents shifted their ancient paths, subtly redistributing heat between the equator and the poles. Others were triggered by massive volcanic eruptions, sending veils of ash and sulfur into the sky, dimming the life-giving sunlight and cooling the atmosphere even further for years at a time. And at the very edges of the great ice sheets, immense ephemeral lakes, sometimes formed, held captive behind colossal walls of frozen water. When those icy barriers, in a dramatic flourish, collapsed, they unleashed floods so vast, so powerful, that they literally rewrote coastlines and may have even shifted the global climate for centuries. To live through these monumental changes was to witness the world slowly tilt out of balance, and then with a patient sigh, settle again. For the animals that roamed the steppe and the forests, it meant diligently following the land as it transformed. Herds of mammoth and bison would push southward when the cold bit deep, only to spread northward again when the ice in its gentle retreat withdrew. Predators in turn followed their ancient prey. Early humans, small, resilient bands of hunters and gatherers, learned to meticulously read these profound patterns in the land, moving with the seasons and the shifting, ethereal borders of the cold. The glaciers themselves, like silent scribes, recorded these swings in exquisite frozen detail. Every delicate layer of ice holds tiny shimmering bubbles of ancient air, trapped as snow fell and pressed down year after patient year. When scientists drill deep into those layers, they can almost hear the planet breathing, They discover the delicate fingerprints of every advance and retreat, every sharp drop or sudden rise in temperature. In that frozen archive, the entire history of the Ice Age patiently waits, stacked one winter on top of another, a magnificent library of deep time. It is one thing to read about this cosmic rhythm and quite another to truly imagine it. Picture standing on a wide, cold plain, the sky a pale, infinite expanse, and the wind sharp, a biting caress. Far to the north, a colossal wall of ice looms like a distant, frozen mountain range. For centuries, it has been creeping forward, mile by painstaking mile, a slow, silent invasion no one alive can truly perceive. Then, after thousands of years, the air subtly warms. The summers, like a long-awaited embrace, lengthen. The very edge of the glacier begins to pull back, a reluctant retreat. Water streams from beneath it, carving new, nascent rivers. The land, once buried in ice, lies bare, raw, and open to the benevolent sun, for the first time in ages. And then, in the fullness of time, the cold, like an ancient memory, returns, and the long, majestic march of the ice begins anew. This, my friends, was the profound breath of the Ice Age. Slow, steady, and immensely powerful enough to sculpt entire continents. It was not a single unchanging freeze or a solitary dramatic thaw, but a vast and patient cycle, one that pushed life to its absolute limits, and then, in a gesture of profound grace, pulled it back again. In that long, rhythmic back and forth, animals evolved, humans adapted, and the Earth, in its profound transformation, became the world we still recognize, even though so much of it has vanished beneath the gentle warmth of the present day. Yet, the story of the Ice Age is not only about the interplay of cold and warmth. It is about the vibrant, living world that took exquisite shape in that frozen light. Because while the climate meticulously set the stage, it was life itself, strange, massive, and astonishingly resilient, that gave the Ice Age its unique and unforgettable character. Beneath the endless, sweeping cold and the vast, shimmering plains of ice, life in its infinite wisdom endured. It did not merely patiently wait for the warmth to return. No, it adapted, it evolved, and it meticulously carved out a place for itself in one of the harshest environments the Earth has ever known. To survive in that profound chill was not simply a matter of brute endurance. It required a deep fundamental transformation, from the smallest, most delicate insect hiding beneath the snow to the largest, most majestic beasts roaming the frozen steppe. The ground during the Ice Age was not a barren, lifeless expanse. Just beneath the insulating blanket of snow lay a hidden, bustling world, built in miniature. In the tough, resilient tundra soils, rodents, like tiny architects, dug intricate networks of burrows, their diminutive bodies shielded by layers of earth and frost. Lemmings, voles, and other small mammals formed the very base of the food chain, their astonishing survival making possible the lives of countless predators above. These tiny creatures did not hibernate entirely. Many remained active beneath the snowpack, their movements carving invisible tunnels beneath the surface. Down there the air was still, the temperature remarkably stable, and the snow overhead acted as a perfect, natural insulation against the worst of the biting wind. Above them, the larger animals moved across the landscape with heavy, deliberate steps, each a testament to their profound adaptation. The woolly mammoths, wrapped in their colossal coats of long, coarse hair with a dense underlayer of insulating wool, could withstand temperatures that would freeze exposed skin in minutes. Their very blood carried special adaptations, allowing it to release oxygen even in the coldest parts of their immense bodies, keeping their limbs from stiffening in the relentless cold. Musk oxen carried thick, luxurious pelts so profoundly effective that snow could settle on their backs without melting, a silent testament that almost no precious heat escaped their bodies. Predators were no less prepared for this demanding world. The dire wolves and saber-toothed cats were built for immense strength and astonishing stamina, with powerful muscles designed to bring down prey in deep snow. Their coats were thick, their paws broad enough to keep them from sinking into the frozen ground as they meticulously stalked their quarry. Even the great cave lions, some of the largest cats the world has ever seen, were profoundly shaped by the cold, leaner than their modern relatives, but with limbs built for the endless, relentless pursuit of ice age prey across open ground. The plants that nourished this frozen world were equally remarkable in their resilience. At first glance, the ice age landscape might seem barren, but just beneath the snow and in the brief, precious summers, hardy vegetation like silent warriors flourished. Grasses dominated the mammoth steppe, covering vast areas from Europe to North America. These grasses were astonishingly rich in nutrients, perfectly suited for the immense grazing herds that needed to eat nearly constantly to survive the profound cold. Mixed among them were tough shrubs and dwarf willows, their branches hugging close to the ground, safe from the relentless cutting wind. These plants had evolved, with ancient wisdom, to withstand long periods of darkness and profound cold, but also to respond quickly to the short, intense window of summer sunlight, bursting into vibrant life. Even insects, those tiny marvels, found a way to endure. Some produced natural antifreeze within their minute bodies, proteins that kept their cells from freezing solid. Others laid eggs that could survive the winter untouched, patiently waiting for the brief, life-giving warmth of summer to awaken the next generation. Birds adapted too. Many species migrated south, but some, like hardy sentinels, stayed, their feathers dense, their metabolisms burning hot enough to endure the deep cold. The snowy owl, for example, patrolled the tundra year-round, feeding on lemmings and thriving in a world that few others could possibly tolerate. Humans, though physically fragile by comparison, were not without their own profound strategies. Early hunters and gatherers relied on ingenuity as much as brute strength. They fashioned clothing from furs, stitched tightly with bone needles to trap precious heat. They built shelters from bone and hide, using mammoth ribs as robust frames for tents covered in thick layers of animal skin, creating warm, secure havens. Fire, that sacred element, was their greatest ally, not only for warmth but for survival itself, allowing them to cook food, harden tools, and push back against the deep, unrelenting dark of Ice Age nights. For these small, resilient bands of people, life was a constant, delicate negotiation with the cold. Every step into the snow carried inherent risk. Frostbite, hunger, and the omnipresent threat of predators were a daily reality. Yet, they learned to move with the seasons, following the herds as they migrated, using rivers and coastlines as ancient landmarks across the endless white expanse. They crafted weapons from stone and bone, sharp enough to pierce the thick hides of the colossal beasts they hunted, and over time, their profound knowledge of this frozen world deepened until they could live not in spite of the cold, but because they understood it, working in harmony with its harsh demands. What made this hidden, intricate web of life truly remarkable was its exquisite balance. The snow did not simply bury the world, it shaped it. Beneath its immense weight, species learned to bend without breaking. Each adaptation, from the smallest vole tunnel to the mammoth's insulating coat, was a profound response to an environment that demanded everything, and in return, gave little. But this world was not only about survival, it was also about transformation. With every swing of the climate's pendulum, with every advance or retreat of the glaciers, life shifted. Species that thrived in the cold sometimes vanished when the world warmed. Others emerged, stepping gracefully into the niches left behind. The Ice Age was not a frozen prison, it was a crucible, and from it emerged creatures and behaviors that still echo in the living world today. Even now, in the vast tundras of Siberia or the desolate beauty of the Arctic Circle, you can perceive fragments of that ancient survival strategy. The muskox still stands, broad and unmoving, a living fortress against the wind. Arctic foxes still change their coats from brown to white with the seasons, vanishing into the snow like ephemeral ghosts. These living remnants are profound reminders that the Ice Age did not end cleanly. It left pieces of itself scattered across the earth, pieces that still endure, living testaments to a bygone era. And as the glaciers breathed in and out, as the cold deepened and then eased, this hidden world beneath the snow never ceased its quiet, profound transformation. What lay ahead was a planet still in motion, one where ice would carve the land in ways that reshaped the very bones of the earth. The ice, you see, was never truly still. It moved with a force so vast and unrelenting that it meticulously reshaped entire continent. When we, in our modern comfort, imagine glaciers, we often picture silent, immobile walls of frozen white. But these great ice sheets were not static monuments. They were colossal engines of change, grinding, crushing, and carving the land beneath them with a profound patience that only the earth itself can truly keep. The largest of them blanketed much of the northern world, an immense frozen dominion. In North America, the Laurentide ice sheet stretched from the high Arctic down to what is now the middle of the United States. It was so impossibly thick in places that its surface rose higher than the tallest mountains, a frozen Everest. Across the Atlantic, the Fennoscandian ice sheet covered Scandinavia and pushed deep into northern Europe, its edge slowly grinding forward like a colossal tide of frozen stone. Even in the southern hemisphere, smaller ice sheets covered the highlands of South America, New Zealand, and parts of Antarctica that reached farther than they do today, silent witnesses to a colder time. These immense sheets of ice were not gentle sculptors. As they advanced, they scraped the earth bare, tearing away ancient forests, crushing hills into submission, and grinding solid rock into fine powder. Beneath their colossal weight, the very crust of the planet itself bent downward, sinking slightly under the immense load. When the ice later retreated, the land rose again, a slow, patient rebound that continues even now in parts of Canada and Scandinavia, a profound sigh of geological relief. The relentless movement of the ice left behind landscapes that are still instantly recognizable, silent testaments to its power. Deep valleys with flat bottoms and steep walls, carved by the relentless pressure of moving glaciers, can be found across the northern world. These are not merely topographical features. They are the profound signatures of ancient forces, great boulders, carried for hundreds of miles within the icy embrace, and then dropped far from their source, sit scattered across open fields, silent witnesses to the epic journeys they once made, trapped in the heart of the ice. And then there are the lakes, thousands of them filling the basins gouged out by glaciers, like tears of the earth. The Great Lakes of North America are perhaps the most famous example, vast bodies of water resting in the magnificent scars left by the retreating Laurentide ice. The glaciers were not merely sculptors of land, they also profoundly shaped the waters of the world. As the ice grew, sea levels dropped, exposing vast coastal plains like hidden treasures. When the ice melted, the seas rose again, drowning those same plains beneath the waves. The land bridges that once connected continents, like the one that linked Asia to North America, existed only because so much of the planet's water was locked up in ice. Each shift of the glaciers, each subtle movement, meticulously rewrote the map of the Earth. Yet, for all their immense power, the glaciers moved with an almost ethereal slowness. A few feet a day was all it took for their colossal weight to change the very face of a continent. To stand before one was to gaze upon a force that felt eternal, even though it was always profoundly in motion. You could hear it sometimes, the sharp, resonant cracks of shifting ice, the low, guttural groan of frozen mass pressing against the land, an ancient lament when meltwater pooled and then, with a sudden violent surge, broke free. It cascaded across the earth in floods, so massive they carved new channels in a matter of days. These were not gentle rivers. They tore at the land with a primal strength born of centuries of trapped water suddenly unleashed. And in their wake they left behind something unexpected. For all their immense destruction, glaciers also created new opportunities for life. When they retreated, they revealed fresh virgin ground, stripped clean and astonishingly rich with mineral dust. Plants, like eager pioneers, were quick to colonize these bare landscapes, sending their delicate roots into the raw earth. In time, animals followed, and in their footsteps came the first human hunters, tracking the herds into the newly unveiled lands the glaciers had uncovered. These frozen sculptures also carried profound stories in their layers. Within the ice itself, scientists have discovered traces of ancient air, ash from distant volcanic eruptions, and even pollen from plants that grew long, long ago. Each layer is a meticulously preserved record, a page in the frozen history of the Earth, telling us not only how the ice shaped the land, but how it breathed in rhythm with the global climate. To the creatures that lived through it, though, the glaciers were not history. They were imposing boundaries, massive and seemingly unmoving. To a mammoth or a bison, A glacier's edge was the very end of their known world, a colossal, uncrossable wall. Even humans, clever and determined as they were, could only move along its borders, following rivers and valleys where the ice had not yet claimed the ground. And as the ice sheets grew and shrank with the slow, deliberate pulse of the planet, they meticulously drew the map of the world we know now. Every rolling hill in northern Europe, every scattered lake across Canada, every stretch of rich soil in the American Midwest, all of it bears the indelible mark of the glaciers. These were not just masses of frozen water, they were the chisels that carved the earth itself. But as they carved, they also profoundly changed the seas. When so much water was locked away in their frozen weight, the oceans, like a vast, collective sigh, fell. The coastlines stretched outward, revealing new, uncharted lands from beneath the waves. And it was in those newly exposed places that life, animal, human and otherwise, would discover unexpected paths forward. When the great ice sheets swelled and locked up so much of the planet's water, the oceans, like a hesitant tide, drew back, a withdrawal that would not reverse for thousands of years. Shorelines stretched outward, exposing vast plains that had been hidden beneath the waves for ages, forgotten realms. Rivers carved new, uncharted paths across this uncovered ground, and entire continents, like ancient puzzle pieces, gained new, unforeseen edges. The world looked profoundly different then, familiar in its overarching shape, but altered in ways that seem almost impossible to imagine now. At the profound height of the Ice Age, sea levels dropped by more than 100 meters. This was not a sudden dramatic plunge, but a slow, patient withdrawal, paced by the relentless, inexorable growth of the glaciers. What had once been shallow coastal waters became windswept grasslands, bays and inlets, transformed into dry valleys, islands connected to mainlands, and land bridges, like ancient pathways, appeared between continents that today are divided by open sea. The most famous of these was Beringia, the immense stretch of land that once connected Asia and North America. It was no narrow strip, but an enormous expanse of tundra and steppe, hundreds of miles wide, dotted with winding rivers, and home to mammoths, bison, and the first humans who would one day cross into a new world. To those who walked it, it wasn't a bridge at all. It was a landscape, a country of its own, rich with life and as real and tangible as any other part of the earth. Farther south, the Sunda Shelf joined the islands of Southeast Asia to the mainland, creating a vast, continuous landmass. Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania merged into a single, connected continent, a lost superland. Across Europe, the North Sea floor was exposed, forming a region known today as Doggerland, a broad plain that stretched between Britain and the rest of the continent, crisscrossed by rivers and dotted with low hills. These new revealed lands didn't just change geography, they profoundly changed the very course of life itself. Animals followed the expanding frontiers, migrating into places where the sea had once barred their way. Humans did the same, tracking game across these new pathways, slowly spreading across the globe in ways that would shape the future of our species. But this profound transformation was not limited to land alone. The retreat of the oceans reshaped the coasts that remained. Beaches stretched outward for miles, estuaries shrank, and coral reefs were left high and dry, bleaching and dying as the water, in its slow withdrawal, abandoned them. The world's oceans grew colder and saltier, their intricate currents shifting in response to the changing balance of water and ice. These changes, in turn, fed back into the global climate, helping to hold the Earth in its frozen state, a delicate, intricate dance of cause and effect. Even the air above the seas changed. As the oceans drew back, vast stretches of exposed continental shelf became immense sources of dust, swept up by strong ice age winds and carried for thousands of miles. This dust settled over the land, creating the thick, fertile layers that would later nourish some of the richest farmlands on Earth. It was another profound reminder that the Ice Age was not only an age of loss, but an age of preparation, meticulously laying the groundwork for the world that would come after the thaw. For those who lived through it, though, these changes would not have been immediately obvious. The sea did not vanish overnight. A hunter could walk the same familiar path his parents had walked, never realizing that far to the east or west, the tide was subtly creeping away. year after patient year. It was only on the grand scale of generations that the transformation revealed itself. Rivers flowing where there had once been bays, herds grazing on ground that had once been ocean floor, and new horizons opening to the daring few who followed them into the unknown. And while the ocean stood still, life, with its astonishing adaptability, adapted. Coasts became rich, hunting grounds. River mouths transformed into abundant feeding places for migrating birds and fish. Humans learned to use these changes to their advantage, following the trails of the animals that now roamed across these exposed plains. In every corner of the Ice Age world, the receding waters revealed not just land, but profound opportunity. Yet, like the glaciers themselves, the oceans would not remain fixed forever. As the climate warmed, the ice would begin its slow, reluctant retreat, and the seas would creep back in, gently drowning the lands they had left bare. Doggerland would sink beneath the North Sea, Beringia would vanish beneath the waters of the Bering Strait, and the coastlines of the world would draw back to something closer to the familiar shape we know today. But that part of the story was still far off. For now, in the heart of the Ice Age, the oceans had paused. The planet stood in its frozen state, locked in a delicate balance of ice and sea that held the world steady for thousands upon thousands of years. It was in this frozen balance that the great winds began to rise and carry their burden of dust across the sky, marking the next great force that shaped this ancient world. The cold alone did not define the Ice Age. Alongside the colossal glaciers and the low, revealing seas came a sky heavy with dust and winds that never seemed to truly rest. The atmosphere during this profound time was not the clear, crisp air we might imagine when we picture a frozen world. No, it was filled with fine, ethereal particles carried across continents, turning the sun hazy and painting the sky in pale, muted tones, a landscape of whispers. This dust, you see, came from the land the ice left behind. When glaciers advanced, they ground the rock beneath them into a fine, almost invisible powder. As the ice pulled back or stalled at its edges, the wind, like a relentless broom, swept across these barren plains, lifting the finest particles into the air and driving them for hundreds, even thousands of miles. Each storm, like a brushstroke, added more, spreading a blanket of dust that settled far from its source. In many regions, these layers still remain, silent testaments to ancient winds. Loess deposits, as scientists call them, stretch across China, parts of Europe and North America. They are hundreds of feet thick in some places, built up grain by patient grain from the ceaseless winds of the Ice Age. Over time, these dusty plains would paradoxically become some of the most fertile soils on Earth. But during the Ice Age itself, they were part of an unending cycle: wind, dust, and the relentless profound cold. The weather that carried this dust was harsh and often unpredictable. Vast temperature differences between the frozen north and the slightly warmer south drove powerful, persistent winds. These winds scoured the land, flattening snow into hard packed sheets and sweeping away what little warmth there was to be found. They carried not only dust but snow, piling it high in drifts that could swallow entire landscapes, transforming them into ephemeral, white mountains. Yet the Ice Age atmosphere was not only a world of wind and dust, it was a world of profound extremes. Winters were long and brutally bitter, with temperatures plunging far below anything most of us could possibly imagine. Summers, though short, could be surprisingly warm in some regions, especially on the great grasslands where the sun had little competition from clouds. This sharp contrast between seasons created an environment where life had to be endlessly adaptable, able to endure deep freezes and then burst into vibrant motion during the brief windows of growth and abundance. Volcanoes, those fiery hearts of the earth, added their own chaos to this already strange sky. Massive eruptions sent ash into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight and deepening the cold for years at a time. In some layers of ice cores, scientists have found traces of these ancient eruptions, delicate fingerprints of moments when the sky itself grew darker and the glaciers, like opportunists, seized the chance to press even farther. Even the very air, the invisible breath of the planet, was different. The levels of carbon dioxide during the Ice Age were far lower than they are today. The thinness of that greenhouse blanket made the atmosphere colder and drier, especially near the Great Ice Sheet. In these regions, Snow fell rarely, not because the cold prevented it, but because there was so little moisture in the air. Paradoxically, the frozen heart of the Ice Age world was often a desert of snow and wind, its surface scoured rather than buried beneath fresh flakes. For the animals that lived in this world, weather was not a passing concern. It was a primal force that shaped their every move. Herds of mammoth and bison followed the shifting winds to find areas where snow had been blown away, exposing the precious grass beneath. Predators trailed them, their survival dependent on these same ancient patterns. Even early humans learned to read the subtle signs in the sky, watching the winds and clouds to understand when the weather might shift and when the cold would deepen. A vital dance of observation. Dust, too, carried its own profound consequences. While it dulled the sky and coated the ground, it also, surprisingly, fed life. Winds dropped nutrients across the plains, scattering minerals that made the Ice Age grasslands unexpectedly rich. This strange balance, an atmosphere full of dust and wind, and yet a land that could still feed countless herds, was one of the quiet paradoxes of the Ice Age world. Imagine standing on one of those windswept plains. The horizon is wide and pale, stretching into infinity. The air is sharp, biting at your skin. The wind, a constant companion, never quite stops its ancient song. In the distance, a haze hangs low, a thin veil of dust stirred up by storms far away. Above it all, the sun glows weakly, its warmth reaching the ground, but never quite enough to chase away the deep bite of the air. In that moment, you could truly feel what it was like to live beneath an Ice Age sky. Harsh, restless, and yet strangely, profoundly full of life. This atmosphere, with all its dust and sweeping winds, was not just a passive backdrop. It was a dynamic force that helped shape the planet and its living things. And as the air moved, it carried with it the seeds of the world that lay beneath, the grasslands that stretched from horizon to horizon, and gave the Ice Age its most defining feature, the endless, frozen steppe, where giants roamed and survival played out on a scale as vast as the land itself. Stretching from the western edges of Europe across the immense expanse of Siberia and over to the wild heart of North America, there was a land unlike anything we perceive today. It was neither frozen tundra nor dense, sheltering forest, but something exquisitely in between, a vast wind-swept grassland that supported some of the greatest gatherings of animal life in Earth's entire history. Scientists, with a sense of awe, call it the Mammoth Steppe, and it was the very beating heart of the Ice Age world. The Mammoth Steppe was enormous, almost incomprehensibly vast, larger than any single biome on Earth today. Its cold, dry air and short, fleeting summers might sound harsh, but this grassland was astonishingly productive. Thick mats of tough, resilient grasses and herbs blanketed the ground, adapted perfectly to the brief, intense season of growth. These plants did not waste precious energy reaching for the sky like trees. Instead, they stayed low, clinging close to the ground where the wind couldn't strip away their warmth, where they could hold fast in the thin, dusty soil left behind by the glaciers. It was this profound abundance of grass that allowed the giants to truly thrive. Herds of woolly mammoths roamed the steppe in colossal numbers, their tusks sweeping low as they patiently dug through snow to reach the food beneath. Steppe bison grazed in endless lines, their heavy coats rippling in the wind like ancient banners. Wild horses, smaller and stockier than the ones we know today, galloped across the open plains in tightly knit herds, their breath misting the frigid air, and mingling among them are the woolly rhinoceroses, enormous broad-shouldered animals with thick, formidable horns that they used to push through snow or defend themselves against predators. Bold enough to approach, the predators of the Mammoth Steppe were no less formidable. Packs of dire wolves followed the herds, their larger size and powerful jaws giving them the strength to bring down even the toughest prey. Cave lions, nearly twice the teeth of modern lions, hunted in coordinated groups, stalking the fringes of the grasslands, their silent presence a constant threat. And then there were the saber-toothed cats, ambush hunters that waited for the perfect fleeting moment to strike, their curved fangs designed to pierce deep and fast. But it was not only the great beasts that lived here. Smaller creatures like a miniature, hidden ecosystem filled every niche. Lemmings and ground squirrels burrowed beneath the earth, their tunnels crisscrossing the frozen soil like an invisible, intricate web. Arctic foxes darted across the steppe, scavenging from kills left by the larger predators or hunting the rodents that lived just below their feet. Even ravens and vultures circled overhead, like dark angels, waiting for a chance to descend when the snow was marked red by a fresh kill. And then there were the humans. They came late to this land compared to the other inhabitants. But when they arrived, they became an integral, profound part of it. Early hunters followed the herds across the open plains, tracking mammoths and bison, learning their ancient patterns and testing their skills against the vastness of this frozen wilderness. They built shelters from mammoth bones covered with hides to keep out the relentless wind, and they painted the creatures they hunted on the walls of caves, their images a powerful record of both admiration and profound survival. What made the mammoth steppe so unique was not just its immense size, but its astonishing stability. For thousands of years, it remained a world apart, shaped by the cold, but also profoundly sheltered from its harshest extremes. The grasses endured the brutal winters, lying dormant beneath the snow, only to explode back to vibrant life in the summer sun. This cycle of freezing and renewal sustained a web of life that was astonishingly resilient. Even as glaciers advanced and retreated at the steppe's edges, the richness of this land can still be glimpsed today. In Siberia, frozen in the permafrost, are the remains of mammoths so exquisitely preserved that their fur still clings to their hides, their stomachs still holding the grasses they once ate. These silent relics tell us what kind of world this was, a place where life was abundant, even in the shadow of the ice, where the ground was hard, the air dry, and yet there was enough to feed giants. Standing in the middle of it would have been an overwhelming experience. The horizon would stretch in every direction, unbroken by forests or mountains, an infinite canvas. The wind would sweep across the plains, carrying the low, guttural sounds of distant herds and the haunting calls of predators on the hunt. Every creature, from the smallest rodent to the largest mammoth, was part of a single, interwoven system, one that turned grass and dust into flesh and bone on a scale almost too large to truly grasp. But this world, for all its size and endurance, was not eternal. It depended on the cold to maintain its delicate balance. When the climate shifted, when the ice began to retreat, and forests crept northward, the steppe began to shrink. Like a fading dream, its great herds were pushed into smaller and smaller refuges, until eventually the grassland of giants became a poignant memory, preserved only in fossils and frozen bones. Before that day came, though, the mammoth steppe stood as one of the greatest natural stages Earth had ever known. It was here that humans honed their survival skills. It was here that the last great Ice Age beasts ruled. And it was here, in this cold and dusty grassland, that life learned to endure in ways that would echo long after the steppe itself was gone. From this vast plain, our journey moves toward the people who walked it. Not just as wanderers, but as survivors who faced a world of ice and wind and found a way to truly call it home. Across the mammoth steppe and along the very edges of the ice, small bands of humans moved with the seasons, like ancient nomads. They were not yet masters of this frozen world, but they were learning, adapting, evolving in a land ruled by bitter winds and towering beasts. Survival meant more than mere strength. It demanded profound knowledge, exquisite skill, and above all, the astonishing ability to adapt. Life for these early humans was shaped entirely by the cold, a constant, unrelenting presence. They built their shelters low against the wind, using whatever materials the unforgiving land offered. In treeless regions where wood was scarce, they turned to the colossal bones of mammoth. Rib bones, tusks, and skulls were meticulously stacked into frames and covered with hides, creating huts that could keep out even the harshest winter air. Inside, the space was cramped but profoundly warm, lit by the flickering glow of a single vital force: fire. Fire was more than a tool. It was a sacred boundary between survival and death. Around its mesmerizing light, families gathered close, their furs pulled tight, their hands outstretched toward the warmth, sharing their very breath. It cooked their food, hardened their weapons, and gave them protection against the endless, inky dark of Ice Age nights. A single flame could signify safety in a world where the cold waited just beyond the walls, patient and unforgiving, a silent predator. But fire alone was not enough. Humans learned to patiently shape stone into blades, scrapers, and spear points sharp enough to pierce the thick hides of mammoths and bison. They crafted intricate tools from bone and antler, each one designed with a precision born from absolute necessity. Hunting in this world was no simple act. It required profound cooperation. Small groups worked together to track their prey across open ground, driving it into ambushes or toward waiting hunters armed with spears. A single successful hunt could feed many mouths, but a failed one could mean days of agonizing hunger. Even in the profound cold, they found ways to create. In caves and shelters scattered across Europe and Asia, they left behind haunting paintings and intricate carvings. Mammoths, bison, horses, and reindeer lined the walls, their outlines traced in ochre and charcoal. Some scenes were simple, almost ethereal. Others showed entire herds captured with such meticulous care that even today their muscles and movements seem vibrantly alive. Handprints pressed against the walls still remain, as if the people who made them were reaching across time, leaving a silent sign that they had been there, that they had witnessed this world and wanted it remembered. No one can say for certain why they did it. Perhaps these images were part of profound rituals, attempts to summon luck for the hunt or honor the majestic animals they so deeply depended on. Perhaps they were lessons for the young, a way of teaching them to recognize the shapes and movements of the creatures they would one day track. Or perhaps they were simply expressions of something deeply, profoundly human, the intrinsic urge to create, even when the world outside was hard and cold. Carvings too appeared during this time. Small, delicate figures, made from bone or ivory, some shaped like animals, others like humans. The most famous among them are the Venus figurines, rounded, stylized representations of the human form. Their purpose remains a mystery, a whispered secret, but they speak of a mind that was not only concerned with the immediate needs of food and shelter. These were the first sparks of imagination, profound proof that even in the silent shadow of the glaciers, humans carried within them an intrinsic need to give shape to abstract ideas. These same agile minds developed new ways to organize their lives. Hunters worked in coordinated groups, learning how to drive animals toward waiting spears. They meticulously tracked the movements of the herds, timing their migrations and mapping the land not with ink or symbols, but with the profound, intricate tapestry of memory. Around their flickering fires they shared knowledge, how to chip stone, how to stitch hides, how to choose the safest path across a river swollen with melts. Nothing was written, but nothing was lost either. Each vital skill was passed from one generation to the next, a continuous chain of survival stretching unbroken through the cold. Even the simple act of fire-making transformed. Early humans learned not only how to keep a flame alive, but how to kindle it from nothing. With flint and pyrite, they struck sparks into dry tinder, coaxing embers until they bloomed into steady, life-giving flames. Fire was no longer a lucky accident, stolen from lightning or kept alive through sheer vigilance. It was theirs to make and control, and in that profound mastery lay the very foundation of everything that followed. But it was art that revealed the truest, most profound transformation. In the flickering, dancing light of a torch, the bare walls of a cave became something more than mere stone. They became a stage for memory and meaning. Here, surrounded by the powerful shapes of mammoths and bison drawn in deep red and black, people could look at their world not only as it was, but as they understood it, as they felt it. They were no longer just surviving in the Ice Age, they were beginning to define it, to give it meaning. And in those quiet, sacred spaces, hidden from the relentless wind and snow, the first delicate hints of what would one day become human culture began to take form. The tools grew sharper, the shelters stronger, the art more intricate, more profound. Piece by painstaking piece, they were learning how to bend the cold to their will, instead of being broken by its relentless force. Yet, even as humans learned to shape their world, they remained a small, fragile part of it. Beyond the flickering edges of their fires and caves, the land still belonged to the great predators that stalked the steppe, and if people were to hold their fragile place in this frozen wilderness, they would have to live alongside those formidable hunters, sharing the same ground and facing the same harsh, unrelenting world. The Ice Age was not only a world of immense herds and hunters with spears, it was also the undisputed domain of predators, creatures forged by the profound cold into perfect, lethal instruments of survival. To walk the frozen plains was to live with a constant, visceral awareness that danger moved silently in the shadows, its presence as much a part of the landscape as the snow and wind. Among the most fearsome were the saber-toothed cats. Their long, curved fangs have become iconic symbols of the Ice Age itself, blades of bone and enamel that could pierce deep into the flesh of their colossal prey. These cats were not built for long, arduous chases. Their legs were powerful but short, their bodies stocky, their immense strength concentrated in their shoulders and neck. They were ambush predators, lurking patiently in the low shrubs or along the edges of River Vela, until an unsuspecting bison or a young mammoth strayed too close. When they struck, it was fast and brutal, their formidable fangs driving home before the prey even had time to fully react or run. Yet, the saber-tooths were not the only hunters to be feared. Cave lions, nearly twice the size of modern lions, prowled the mammoth steppe. Unlike the solitary saber-tooth, these great cats likely hunted in coordinated groups, their cooperation giving them an immense advantage over even the largest prey. Imagine a pack of them fanning out across the snow, their golden coats blending seamlessly into the pale light, their paws moving silently over the frozen ground. Few animals could withstand a coordinated attack from predators of such immense size and strength. Then there were the dire wolves, heavier and significantly more powerful than the wolves we know today. They roamed in packs, their sheer numbers transforming them into one of the deadliest forces of the Ice Age. They followed the herds for miles, wearing down their prey until exhaustion, a relentless companion, delivered the kill. For humans, these wolves were both rivals and potent warnings. The haunting sound of their howls rolling across the steppe was a constant reminder that, in this frozen world, hunters were never truly safe. Even the smaller predators held their own crucial place in the hierarchy of fear. The wolverine, fierce and relentlessly determined, was a scavenger that could drive away animals many times its own size. Foxes darted at the edges of hunts, stealing scraps whenever they could. Raptors circled overhead, like watchful spirits, waiting for the chance to descend upon the remains left behind by the great hunters of the ice. Humans did not exist outside this intricate chain. They were an integral part of it. When they ventured out from their fragile shelters to hunt or scavenge, they risked crossing paths with these formidable predators. A single misstep could turn the hunter into the hunted. This constant, profound pressure forced people to be cautious, to travel in groups, to keep their fires burning bright at night, as both warmth and a vital warning. The glow of a campfire was a fragile barrier against the dark, but it was often enough to hold the vast, silent shadows at bay. The relationship between humans and predators was not only one of fear, it was also one of profound competition, and perhaps a grudging respect. When early hunters tracked a herd of bison, they sometimes found themselves following the same ancient trail as a pack of dire wolves. When they scavenged the remains of a mammoth, they might arrive to find a saber-tooth already feeding. In these tense moments, survival was not only about brute strength, but about nerve, about knowing when to fight, when to retreat, and when to patiently wait for the larger predator to finish its meal and move on. Yet, in time, humans found subtle ways to tip the delicate balance. Spears gave them reach. Fire gave them a weapon that even the boldest predators hesitated to challenge. Slowly they became more than just prey that fought back. They became rivals that could not be ignored. Still, this was not dominance. It was a truce of necessity, an uneasy coexistence on the vast open steppe where every living thing fought for the same few precious calories of meat and fat. Predators shaped the behavior of humans just as much as they shaped the herds. The intrinsic need to watch, to stay alert, to plan every movement became an ingrained part of life itself, and perhaps in the constant presence of saber-tooths and cave lions, humans learned something else profoundly important: the immense value of cooperation. Alone, a person was vulnerable. Together, around their fires, armed with their primitive tools and their collective voices, they stood a chance. The Ice Age was a world that never allowed anyone, beast or human, to forget what lurked just beyond the comforting reach of the firelight. The predators of the permafrost were a constant, chilling reminder that survival was never guaranteed, and yet, it was in this dangerous, demanding world that humans sharpened not only their spears, but their very minds, becoming more than just one more animal moving across the steppe. As the great hunters prowled the snow and the wind swept over the frozen plains, the stage was set for a profound struggle that would shape the very fate of the giants that ruled this land, a struggle that would decide which species would endure and which would gently fade into the long, silent memory of the Ice Age. The Ice Age was a world of immense scale. Everywhere you turned, there was something larger, stranger, or more formidable than anything that walks the earth today. It wasn't only the mammoths or the saber-tooths. Across the continents, in every habitat shaped by the profound cold and ceaseless wind, there were creatures that seemed almost mythical, a poignant reminder that this was a wilder, more untamed planet than the one we know now. On the open grasslands, the mammoth herds were only the beginning of this grand procession. Beside them roamed the woolly rhinoceroses, broad-shouldered and cloaked in dense fur, their long, formidable horns sweeping forward like natural spears. These animals were powerful enough to defend themselves against nearly any predator, and yet they shared the steppe with bison that stood taller than a man, wild horses with thick, stocky frames, and musk oxen built to survive the unrelenting cold, living fortresses of fur and muscle. Farther south, where the ice reluctantly gave way to open forests and temperate plains, other giants ruled. Mastodons wandered among the trees, stripping bark from trunks with their long, flexible trunks. They were distant relatives of the mammoth, smaller but no less imposing. Ground sloths the size of small cars lumbered through the Americas, their massive claws digging into roots and tearing branches down from above with astonishing ease. And in the same lands where these slow-moving herbivores roamed, formidable predators followed. The short-faced bear, towering over any living bear today, stalked across the grasslands of North America, its long legs carrying it at speeds that would surprise any creature unfortunate enough to draw its attention. In Australia, the world was no less strange. There, giant kangaroos with powerful limbs shared the land with marsupial lions, predators unlike anything else on Earth. Enormous flightless birds, heavier than ostriches, stalked the open country, while reptiles far larger than their modern descendants lingered in rivers and swamps, their armored bodies and crushing jaws unchanged since deep time. Even the oceans carried their share of Ice Age wonders. Along the coasts, sea levels had fallen, exposing new hunting grounds for early humans and the predators of the sea alike. Marine mammals like the enormous Steller sea cow, a gentle relative of the manatee, grazed on underwater meadows of kelp, while fearsome sharks still prowled the deeper, darker waters. Life in the Ice Age was not simply land-bound. It was a global network of magnificent giants. What made this world even more extraordinary was the sheer density of these animals. The mammoth steppe and the surrounding regions were among the most productive ecosystems the planet has ever seen, supporting vast numbers of herbivores and the predators that followed them. Food was never abundant by modern standards, but the cold, dry conditions produced grasslands that stretched nearly unbroken across continents, creating an unending stage for herds to roam and hunters to stalk. Humans lived among these creatures in a kind of precarious balance. To hunt a mammoth or a bison was to risk everything, but the rewards were too great to ignore. A single successful hunt could feed an entire band and provide precious bone and hide for tools and shelter. Yet, there was also constant danger in sharing the land with predators that could challenge humans for their kills or for their very lives. To survive in this world of megafauna, humans became observers as much as hunters. They learned the habits of every creature they encountered, the way bison gathered before a storm, the trails mammoths followed to reach the best grazing grounds, the patterns of predators shadowing the herds. Each scrap of knowledge could mean the difference between life and death. And yet, for all its danger, this was a world of astonishing richness. Imagine standing on a ridge above the Ice Age plains. Before you stretches an ocean of grass and movement, mammoths pushing through the snow, bison kicking up clouds of frost, horses stamping and snorting in the cold air. In the distance, you see the dark, powerful shapes of predators, following the herds with patient, relentless determination. Overhead, vultures circle, their sharp eyes fixed on the profound drama unfolding below. Everywhere the world is alive, immense, and untamed, a vibrant tapestry of survival. But this abundance was fragile. It was held together by the profound cold, by the vast reach of the glaciers and the steppe that surrounded them. As the climate shifted and the ice began to retreat, this world of giants would inevitably change. Forests would reclaim the plains, rivers would swell and redraw the land, and the magnificent creatures that once ruled the Ice Age would face a challenge they could not overcome. Before that profound change came, though, this wilder earth thrived. It was here in the age of mammoths and saber-tooths and towering sloths that humans sharpened their tools, their wits, and their profound determination. They did not merely live in the shadow of giants, they learned from them, and soon as the ice began its long, reluctant retreat, the relationship between humans and these massive creatures would shift in ways that would alter the course of the Ice Age forever. The Ice Age did not end with a single dramatic thaw. It was not a sudden collapse of cold or an overnight vanishing of the colossal glaciers. Instead, it was a long, uneven retreat, a slow, patient unraveling of the frozen grip that had held the world captive for tens of thousands of years. The Earth shifted in small, almost imperceptible increments, and each change carried profound consequences that meticulously reshaped the land, the seas, and the myriad lives that depended on them. It began with warmth so subtle that it might have gone unnoticed. Summers grew slightly longer, and the snows that once lingered deep into the year began to melt more completely, yielding to the sun's gentle persuasion. The glaciers, those immense frozen rivers of ice, felt the difference first. Their edges softened, like ancient sculptures yielding to time. Meltwater trickled across their colossal surfaces, carving channels that grew wider and deeper with each passing season. What had once seemed silent and still now began to move with a new kind of urgency, a liquid whisper. These early meltwaters cut through the land like sharp ancient knives. Glacial rivers burst forth from beneath the ice, carrying silt and stone in their torrents, reshaping valleys and carving out new channels with astonishing force. Lakes formed where the ice blocked their path, only to drain in sudden, catastrophic floods when those icy barriers finally gave way. Each flood tore across the land with an unstoppable force, leaving behind scars that would last for ages, profound geological memories. As the glaciers withdrew, they revealed ground that had not seen sunlight in thousands of years. This raw, virgin land was barren at first, scraped clean by the grinding weight of the ice, but life in its infinite tenacity wasted no time in reclaiming it. Mosses and lichens crept in first, clinging to the exposed rock like delicate prayers. Then came the grasses, their resilient roots sinking into the fresh soil carried by the winds. Slowly, patiently, the barren ground transformed into new ecosystems, green threads woven across the grey scars of the retreating ice. The animals followed. Herds of bison and mammoth moved into the freshly uncovered plains, grazing on the new growth, a testament to life's enduring power. Predators shadowed them, filling the same ancient roles, but now in a subtly changing landscape. Humans, too, pressed forward. They tracked the rivers, hunted along the edges of the shrinking glaciers, and stepped into regions that had been buried in ice for generations. A new frontier. But the retreat of the glaciers was not steady. There were pauses, even reverse periods of warming were followed by sharp, sudden returns of the cold, moments when the ice surged forward once more, reclaiming the ground it had lost. These were brief compared to the long sweep of the Ice Age, but for the people and animals living through them, they were chilling reminders that the Earth's great thaw was far from simple. One of the most dramatic of these reversals came in what we now call the Younger Dryas, a sudden, brutal return to near-glacial conditions roughly 12,000 years ago. Just as the world seemed to be warming for good, the cold came rushing back, like an unwelcome guest, halting the retreat of the glaciers and plunging much of the planet into a final, unexpected freeze. For over 1,000 years, the advance of spring was delayed, the grasslands withered, and survival became once again a matter of profound endurance. and yet even that last gasp of the Ice Age eventually gave way. When the cold finally loosened its grip for good, the glaciers retreated faster than ever. The seas, fed by the meltwater of 1,000 rivers, began to rise. Lands vanished beneath the waves. Land bridges that had once carried humans and animals across continents were swallowed by the ocean. Beringia, the vast tundra that had linked Asia to North America, slipped beneath the waters of the Bering Strait. Doggerland, once a rich hunting ground between Britain and mainland Europe, was drowned by the rising North Sea, a poignant loss. As the world warmed, forests began to creep northward, replacing the great grasslands of the Mammoth Steppe. Trees spread across Europe, Asia, and North America, transforming open plains into shadowed woodlands. Many of the Ice Age giants, creatures built for a world of cold and endless space, found themselves hemmed in by this changing landscape. Some adapted, many did not. For humans, this profound transformation was an unprecedented opportunity. As the glaciers retreated and the climate stabilized, they discovered lands rich in rivers, fertile soil, and new resources. They followed the meltwaters, settled near the lakes and valleys carved by the ice, and began the long process of turning from wandering hunters into something different. The first settlers of a warming world. Yet even as they adapted to this new earth, the glaciers remained a memory, profoundly carved into the land. Their valleys became highways for new rivers. Their deposits of silt and stone became the fertile foundations of future farmlands. Their retreat marked not only the end of an age of cold, but the profound beginning of the world that would follow. The Ice Age was not over yet, but its immense strength was broken. The walls of ice that had once seemed eternal were fading, and in their place, new landscapes were emerging. The last great floods were still to come, and with them the final transformation of the planet. As the glaciers weakened and the world warmed, the ice did not simply vanish. It fought its way out, melting in fits and starts, sometimes quietly, sometimes in catastrophic bursts. Beneath and within the shrinking sheets of ice, water gathered in vast hidden reservoirs, held back by walls of frozen mass that had stood for thousands of years. When those walls failed, the earth itself seemed to roar. These were not ordinary floods. They were torrents so immense that they literally rewrote the land in a matter of days. In North America, one of the greatest examples of this lay beneath the Laurentide ice sheet. As it melted, a massive body of water known as Glacial Lake Agassiz formed, larger than all of the Great Lakes combined. For centuries it remained trapped behind walls of ice and land. But ice is not permanent. When its barriers gave way, the lake exploded outward in a flood that would have been beyond anything the human eye could easily comprehend. Water surged across the land with unstoppable force. Entire valleys drowned in hours. Rivers that had been small and meandering were transformed into raging torrents miles wide. These floods carried boulders as easily as twigs, grinding the earth and scouring deep channels into the bedrock. They poured toward the oceans, raising sea level, and in doing so they altered the climate itself. Each flood was like a jolt to the planet's intricate system, reshaping wind patterns and redistributing heat across the globe. This was not an isolated event. Around the edges of the melting glaciers, other hidden lakes lay waiting. Some broke free in violent bursts, sending walls of water crashing over the landscape. Others drained more slowly, their outflows carving new rivers that still exist today. The Columbia River Gorge in the Pacific Northwest, for instance, was partly shaped by a series of these glacial outbursts, floods so massive that they tore through the land again and again, leaving behind a landscape of cliffs and canyons, as if carved by an ancient giant's hand. In Europe, similar forces were at work. As the ice withdrew, meltwater pooled in basins, forming lakes that eventually overflowed, changing the course of rivers and cutting new paths through the land. Even in Siberia, vast glacial lakes once covered what are now dry plains, their waters locked in place by walls of ice, until they too broke and spilled away. For the humans who lived in this shifting world, these floods must have been both terrifying and profoundly transformative. Camps and hunting grounds near the shores of these lakes would have been swept away in an instant. Valleys that once teemed with game would vanish beneath rushing water. Yet in their wake, these floods also left behind new landscapes, fertile plains, and waterways that would become lifelines for the generations that followed. Even the lakes that never burst played a profound role in reshaping the planet. Some remained trapped in the land for centuries after the glaciers retreated, their waters collecting in the deep scars carved by ice. Many of the great lakes we know today, Superior, Michigan, Huron, are the remnants of this time, their basins filled by meltwater as the last of the ice vanished. These lakes became more than just geological features. They were reservoirs of life, feeding the rivers and nourishing the plants and animals that would reclaim the once frozen world. But not all these lakes were permanent. Some were ghosts of the Ice Age, vanishing as quickly as they appeared, their waters draining away once the ice that held them back was gone. Others shrank into smaller forms, their massive shorelines left behind like faded memories etched into the earth. To the people of the time, these changes must have felt as if the world itself was shifting under their feet. One generation might grow up beside a vast lake, its distant shores barely visible. The next might find that same lake gone, replaced by open grassland or a new river running where none had been before. In the span of human memory, the land was alive, changing in ways that demanded constant adaptation. These floods and hidden lakes were not only endings, they were beginnings. They carried away the last remnants of the glacial world and carved out the landscapes of the present. They created the river valleys where future civilizations would one day rise. They left behind fertile plains, enriched with the sediments of a vanished age. And in their rush and their silence, they marked the final struggles of the Ice Age as it yielded to a warmer, greener earth. But even as the waters reshaped the land, another story was unfolding. The fate of the giants that had ruled this frozen world for so long. The Ice Age was melting away, and with it, many of the creatures that had defined it would soon follow. As the glaciers retreated and the world warmed, the great animals of the Ice Age faced a challenge they could not overcome. For tens of thousands of years, mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats had dominated their frozen world. They had adapted perfectly to a life built on cold winds and endless grasslands. But the Ice Age was ending, and with it, the very foundation of their survival began to crumble. The first blow came from the changing climate. As the ice sheets melted, the mammoth steppe, the vast dry grassland that had supported herds of enormous grazers, began to shrink. In its place, forests crept northward, their trees closing in on land that had once been open and boundless. For creatures built for the plains, this new world was suffocating. The grasses that had fed them disappeared beneath canopies of leaves, replaced by plants they were poorly suited to eat. Mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses could move only so far before the forest blocked their way. Steppe bison and wild horses, once able to roam across continents, found their ranges cut into fragments. The predators that depended on these great herds, dire wolves, saber-toothed cats, and cave lions, saw their food supplies dwindle. Bit by bit, the intricate web of Ice Age life began to unravel. But climate alone was not the only force pressing on these giants. At the same time, humans were spreading into every corner of their world, with tools sharpened over thousands of years, and the knowledge passed down through generations. Hunters had become formidable. A single band of skilled humans armed with spears could bring down a mammoth. What once had been a rare and dangerous feat became more frequent, especially as populations grew and hunting methods became more sophisticated. Some researchers argue that it was not simply hunting that doomed the giants, but the profound combination of hunting and a rapidly warming climate. The great animals were already under pressure from shrinking habitats and dwindling food. When humans arrived, they pushed the delicate balance past its breaking point. The evidence lies scattered across the earth. In Siberia, frozen mammoths lie buried in the permafrost, some with wounds that could only have come from human weapons. In North America, mammoth kill sites show clear signs of organized hunts, with bones cracked open for marrow and meat stripped clean. These were not isolated incidents. They were part of a larger pattern, one that played out wherever humans and megafauna met. And yet, even as many of these giants disappeared, some clung to survival. On a remote Arctic island called Wrangell, a small population of mammoths survived for thousands of years after their kin vanished from the mainland. They dwindled in size, becoming smaller, weaker versions of their majestic ancestors, but they endured, cut off from the rest of the world by rising seas. Eventually, even they disappeared, but their long survival stands as a final, poignant echo of a vanished age. The extinction was not swift. It happened in waves, beginning in some regions, while the giants still roamed in others. In Australia, many of the great marsupial beasts were gone long before the northern ice sheets had even begun to melt. In the Americas, mammoths and saber-tooths held on until the warming world and the spread of humans reached a tipping point. By the time the Ice Age finally yielded to the present climate, the great herds had thinned to nothing, leaving behind only bones and silence. This extinction wave reshaped the Earth as much as the melting glaciers. With the loss of the giants, entire ecosystems shifted. The grasslands that had once been kept open by herds of mammoths and bison gave way more quickly to forests. Predators that had relied on large prey either vanished or adapted to smaller targets, and humans, no longer sharing the land with towering beasts, found themselves in a quieter, emptier world. Still, traces of that wild age remain. The muskox survives in the Arctic tundra, a living fragment of the steppe. Bison still roam in smaller herds, their ancestors having endured when so many others failed. Even the elephants of today carry echoes of the mammoths in their blood, a genetic memory. But the giants who once defined the Ice Age exist now only in frozen remains, in scattered fossils, and in the faint, ancient memory of what the Earth once was. Their disappearance was not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new one. With the glaciers gone and the great beasts fading, the world shifted once more, setting the stage for the rise of a planet that looked more and more like the one we now call home. When the last of the great beasts faded, and the glaciers withdrew for the final time, the world began to change in ways that would have been unrecognizable to those who had lived through the height of the Ice Age. What had once been a frozen, wind-swept planet of ice and dust began to soften. The sharp edges carved by the glaciers gave way to gentler forms. Rivers swelled, forests advanced, and the earth began a slow, profound transformation from white to green. The warming was not sudden, but its effects were everywhere. Vast sheets of ice that had dominated the northern continents for tens of thousands of years shrank back toward the poles. In their absence, valleys opened, plains stretched wide, and the scars left by the retreating glaciers filled with meltwater. These new lakes became anchors for life, their shores lined with the first green shoots of plants, reclaiming the land, a verdant embrace. The grasses that had once stretched endlessly across the mammoth steppe began to give way to forests. Birch and pine came first, hardy pioneers, able to grow in poor soil and cold conditions. Then came oak, elm, and other broadleaf trees, spreading northward as the climate stabilized. Within a few thousand years, regions that had once been treeless plains were transformed into dense woodlands. The open horizon of the Ice Age was replaced by a canopy of green, a profound shift in perspective. With the forest came new animals. Deer moved into the newly shaded lands, followed by wild boar and smaller grazers that thrived among the trees. Wolves, once hunters of the great herds, adapted to the forest, becoming stealthier and more specialized. Even humans changed with the land, no longer following the vast migrations of mammoths or bison. They learned to hunt the more elusive creatures of the woods, crafting bows and arrows to strike from a distance, and creating tools suited not to the steppe, but to the shaded world beneath the leaves. The rivers born from the melting ice carried nutrients into the lands, turning many of these regions into fertile corridors of life. Fish filled the streams, and birds nested along the water's edge. Wetlands formed in the hollows left by retreating glaciers, attracting an explosion of life. Where once there had been a landscape of scarcity, there was now abundance. Even the oceans changed. As the glaciers released their water back into the seas, shorelines shifted inward. Coastal plains vanished beneath the waves, but in their place, new bays and estuaries were formed, teeming with marine life. Where the sea met the land, humans found some of their richest hunting grounds, gathering shellfish and fish along the coasts and adapting once again to a changing world. But this transformation was not only physical, it reshaped the very rhythm of life itself. The Ice Age had been a world of profound extremes with its endless winters and brief frantic summers. Now, as the climate warmed, the seasons became more balanced. Springs stretched longer, summers grew milder, winters softened. The world was no less demanding, but its pace was gentler, its opportunities broader. This shift opened the door to something entirely new. For the first time, humans began to stay in one place for longer periods. They gathered plants, hunted smaller game, and learned to read the cycles of the changing environment. Slowly, tentatively, they began to shape the land, clearing patches of forest, scattering seeds, and setting the first stones of a future where they would no longer only follow what nature gave, but begin to mold it themselves. The rebirth of the planet was not merely the end of the Ice Age, it was the very foundation of the world we know. The forests that spread across Europe and Asia, the grasslands that remained in North America, the swelling rivers and new lakes, all of these became the backdrop for the rise of human society. From these green landscapes would come the first farms, the first villages, and eventually the first cities. Yet, even in this greener earth, reminders of the Ice Age lingered. The Great Lakes, carved by glaciers, still dotted the continents. The wind still carried dust from the places where the ice had once ground rock into powder. In the far north, tundra and ice still clung to the edges of the world, a pale echo of the age that had passed. The planet had not simply recovered from the Ice Age, it had been remade by it. Every valley and river, every fertile plain, every forest that spread in the wake of the retreating glaciers was a profound legacy of that frozen era. From the scars of the ice came a world ready for something new, and humanity, no longer just a species of hunters on the steppe, was about to take its next step forward. But even as green spread over the land, the memory of the Ice Age did not fade. Its marks were written deep into the stones and soils of the earth, waiting for those who would one day learn how to read them. Even after the last of the great glaciers retreated and the world grew green, the Ice Age never truly vanished. Its profound traces remain all around us, etched into the very surface of the earth and hidden deep within its layers. Every valley carved by ice, every boulder stranded far from its birthplace, and every band of sediment locked in stone is a quiet, persistent reminder of a world that once lay frozen beneath an endless sky of snow and wind. The most striking of these traces are the landforms themselves. Across North America and Europe, U-shaped valleys bear the unmistakable signature of glaciers. Unlike rivers which carve narrow channels with winding paths, ice scours everything in its way, leaving behind broad, deep valleys with sheer walls and lapped bottoms. These landscapes are the shadows of the ancient ice sheets, silent but undeniable proof of their slow, grinding power. Scattered across the plains, solitary boulders tell another part of the story. These glacial erratics, some as large as houses, were carried for hundreds of miles within the ice and left behind when the glaciers melted. They rest where no mountain could have formed them, standing like ancient monuments to journeys that ended thousands of years before the first human cities were built. Lakes, too, are relics of the frozen past. The Great Lakes, the Finger Lakes, and countless smaller ones across the northern hemisphere were carved by the immense weight of the glaciers. When the ice withdrew, these deep scars filled with meltwater, becoming the freshwater giants we know today. Every ripple of their surfaces is a remnant of an age when the world was locked in ice. But the most delicate whispers of the Ice Age are hidden in places we cannot see. Beneath Greenland and Antarctica, ancient layers of ice hold air bubbles trapped for hundreds of thousands of years. Scientists drill deep into these frozen archives, retrieving cores that read like the pages of a history book. Each layer preserves a moment in time, recording the atmosphere, the temperature, even the dust carried by long-vanished winds. From these frozen records we have learned how the Ice Age began, how it breathed in cycles of cold and warmth, and how it finally loosened its grip. In the rocks beneath our feet, there are other profound traces, loess plains, vast deposits of wind-blown dust left behind during the Ice Age, stretch across China, Europe, and North America. These layers of fine, pale soil were carried by Ice Age winds and dropped in thick blankets that still feed the farmlands of today. Every harvest that grows from these soils is a quiet, enduring legacy of the glaciers that once scoured the land bare. Even the bones of the Ice Age remain, pulled from frozen ground and deep caves where they have slept for millennia, Perfectly preserved mammoths, their hair still intact, emerge from the Siberian permafrost. In North America, the bones of mastodons and giant sloths lie buried beneath peat bogs. In Europe, the skulls of cave lions and dire wolves rest in caverns once lit by the fires of early humans. These remains are not just fossils, they're direct, tangible connections to a world where cold and survival shaped everything. The stories written in stone and ice are not just about the past, they are a profound reminder of how deeply the Ice Age shaped the world we live in now. The fertile soils, the river valleys, the coastlines, all of these were sculpted in that frozen era. Even the distribution of plants and animals across the continents was set in motion by the slow advance and retreat of the glaciers. To walk through these places today is to stand in the footprint of that vanished world. A hiker tracing the rim of a glacial valley, a farmer turning the rich dust of an ancient loess plain, or a scientist holding a shard of mammoth tusk, all of them are touching the same story. A story written not in words but in stone, water, and bone. Yet, these traces are not only silent reminders of what once was, they are clues, pieces of a vast puzzle that we are still patiently putting together. Each valley, mapped, each core of ice drilled, and each fossil uncovered deepens our understanding, not only of the Ice Age, but of the immense forces that still shape our planet today. And as we follow those whispers through stone and ice, we find that the past is not truly gone, it lives beneath our feet, hidden in the landscapes we see every day. The Ice Age may have ended thousands of years ago, but its fingerprints are still everywhere. Every time we look at a map, every time we step outside and see the familiar shape of a valley, the winding course of a river, or the intricate outline of a coastline, we are looking at the profound legacy of that frozen past. The world we live in is not separate from the Ice Age. It is the world the Ice Age meticulously left behind. The most obvious echoes are in the land itself. The Great Lakes, carved out by the grinding weight of glaciers, still hold a fifth of the planet's fresh water, a colossal reservoir. The smooth hills of New England and the plains of northern Europe are draped in glacial sediments, their soils made fertile by the dust and rock left behind as the ice retreated. Even the winding courses of many modern rivers were first traced by the torrents of meltwater that poured from the glaciers at the end of the Ice Age. In the far north, the Ice Age is not just history, it is still profoundly present. The tundra of Siberia, Alaska, and northern Canada remains frozen for much of the year, its permafrost locking away the remains of a world that once was. In that frozen ground, the bones of mammoths still emerge along with traces of plants and even bacteria that have slept since the coldest days of the Pleistocene. Our atmosphere, too, still carries the marks of the Ice Age. The levels of carbon dioxide and the rhythms of Earth's climate were shaped in part by those frozen cycles. The patterns of ocean currents and wind, the very systems that carry storms and rains across the planet, were influenced by the way the glaciers sculpted the continents and shifted the immense weight of the Earth's crust. Even today, the planet still readjusts from the immense burden of ice that once pressed it down, the land rising millimeter by millimeter in a slow rebound that began thousands of years ago and has yet to finish. The legacy of the Ice Age is written in the lives of animals as well. Bison still roam the plains of North America, direct descendants of herds that grazed alongside mammoth. Musk oxen, shaggy and unyielding, remain on the Arctic tundra, unchanged from their Ice Age ancestors. The reindeer and caribou that migrate across the north each year are following paths carved not only by instinct but by a memory older than human history, one rooted in the age of ice and wind. Even within us, the echoes remain. The migrations of our ancestors were guided by the world of the Ice Age. Humans crossed land bridges exposed by low seas, followed the herds across the mammoth steppe, and learned to survive in cold that would have killed the unprepared. The skills forged in that time, fire, tools, cooperation, didn't fade with the melting ice. They became the very foundations of everything that followed. In the landscapes we farm, in the roots of our rivers and the shape of our coastlines, in the animals that still walk the tundra, and in the bones buried beneath our feet, the Ice Age is never far away. It shaped the Earth, and in many profound ways, it shaped us. But perhaps the most striking echo of all is this. The Ice Age reminds us how quickly the world can change. Entire ecosystems came and went. Seas rose and fell. Giants walked the earth and vanished forever. And through it all, life adapted. It survived. It found new ways forward. The frozen world may be gone. But its story is not over. It continues in the ground beneath us, in the fossils we uncover, and in the landscapes that stretch around us. The Ice Age is not just a chapter of the past, it is the prologue of the present. And as we turn from these echoes toward the world we know now, we can finally step back and look at the full sweep of that frozen age, from its first creeping cold to its last lingering traces. If you could walk back into the Ice Age now, step by patient step, past the forests and rivers of the present, and into that frozen world, the very first thing you would notice would be the profound quiet. The wind would still move, a soft ancient sigh, and the snow would still fall, a gentle rhythmic dance, but there would be a deep stillness beneath it all, the kind that only comes when time itself seems to stretch wider than you can possibly imagine. You would see the horizon open into vast, boundless plains where the sky feels larger than the earth below it, an infinite canvas of pale light. You'd watch herds of mammoths moving slowly, deliberately, across the steppe, their breath rising in ethereal clouds against the pale air. In the distance, bison would graze in lines that seemed to go on forever, a living river of fur and muscle. And far beyond them, the faint dark shapes of predators would follow, silent and patient, part of the eternal hunt. The cold would bite at your skin, sharp and invigorating, but the world itself would feel profoundly alive in a way that is hard to find today. A world of raw, unfiltered scale, untouched by the clamour of modern life. You might stop by the edge of a glacier, its colossal wall rising like a frozen cliff, deep blue ice gleaming where the sunlight strikes it, revealing ancient depths. Water would trickle down its face in thin, silvery streams, the nascent beginning of rivers that would one day carve their way across entire continents. The sound of it would be low and steady, a constant reminder that even the mightiest walls of ice are never truly still. They breathe, they shift, and eventually, with a profound sigh, they let go. And then, if you turned away from the ice and walked into the softer lands, you'd find faint traces of human life, a small, resilient circle of huts, built from bone and hide, smoke rising from a fire at the very center, a beacon in the cold. You'd see footprints in the snow, tools laid out for sharpening, and hunters returning from the distant horizon, their faces marked by wind and sun, by the profound experience of survival. These people would look at the same frozen land, not with wonder or fear, but with an intimate familiarity. For them, this was not a distant past. It was simply home. To walk through this world would be to see the earth in one of its most honest, unadorned forms. No cities, no roads, no walls, only the slow, patient work of nature, carving and shaping everything over millennia. The Ice Age was not a frozen prison. It was a teacher, a sculptor, and in its own profound way, a beginning. And even though it is gone, its presence has never truly left us. It lingers in the valleys and lakes carved by its glaciers, in the fertile soil that feeds our crops, in the animals that still roam the coldest edges of the planet. It lives in our own history, in the fires our ancestors built, and the tools they patiently carried across the endless snow. If you stand outside on a winter's night, when the air is sharp and the world is still, you can almost feel it, a memory that isn't entirely yours, yet resonates deep within, written in the ancient stones beneath your feet, carried in the whispered wind, and murmured by the quiet, immense weight of time itself. The Ice Age is not just something we left behind, it is something that profoundly shaped the very ground we walk on and the lives we live. Its story is written into the world, and if you listen closely enough, it is still there, faint but steady, like footsteps in ancient snow. And so, as we gently leave this frozen world behind, we carry it with us. Every glacier, every majestic herd, every fragile, resolute camp of our ancestors has led, step by patient step, to this very moment. The Ice Age is gone, but its story remains etched into the earth and into us. When you look at the land, the meandering rivers, the rolling hills, the quiet stretch of sky, you're seeing its enduring legacy. When you feel the chill of a winter wind, You're touching something ancient, a faint, profound echo of a world where survival was the only language, and the snow never truly stopped falling. We walk now in a different age, one of warmth and constant change, but we are profoundly shaped by the one that came before, and perhaps in knowing that, we can better perceive our place in this grand story, not as separate from it, but as its continuous, unfolding continuation. The Ice Age never truly ends. It lingers in stone, in water, in memory, and in the quiet. If you pause long enough to listen, it is still there, patiently waiting, a silent whisper from deep time, welcoming you to rest.